Welcome to the Starter Girlz podcast, the show dedicated to the Starter Girl. She's an achiever, she's a creator, she's a magic maker, she's a dreamer, and she is doing all the things. I'm your host, Jennifer Loehding, and welcome to this episode. Welcome to another episode of the Starter Girlz podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Loehding, and wherever you are tuning in today, we are thrilled to have you here. And as I always say on the Starter Girlz, my job here is to help you become an effective leader in whatever capacity that means in all the areas of life, dealing with your relationships, your career, your money, and your health and well-being. And so today I have another fabulous guest on here. I'm so excited to chat with her. She says that I love this, by the way, when the sun is out, she is training, coaching, and consulting business leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals how to close more deals. When the sun goes down, she is a stand-up comedian. And so she is the CEO of Select Sales Development. She's a certified emotional intelligence expert, a certified speaking professional, author, writer, and stand-up comedian. And so, Merit, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I'm excited to be with you.
This could be so much fun. Like, I have to say all the cool things that you get to do. And I just love that you get to have fun in your life and use it in your work. And just what a blessing that is to be able to do something like that.
It is fun. It is definitely fun to add some comedy to your work life.
Absolutely. All right. So I want to get this conversation going because I know, our listeners are going to hear this and be like, okay, what does really all this have to do with each other? But maybe tell us a little bit. I first would love to know how you got into this. I want to know how this came about for you. So maybe give us just a little brief history on what led you to where you are today.
Sure. Let's see. I've always been in sales management, training, coaching, consulting, opened my business in 1998. I was doing presentations to grow my business, as many entrepreneurs do. And the more funny my presentations were, the more business I ended up getting, which was an interesting thing to note. And so I started studying stand-up comedy. I took a workshop, and at the end of the workshop, we actually performed 7 minutes of original comedy. And as soon as I did that, I know I have got to keep doing this. It was absolutely amazing. So I studied, I did little, open mics, I did all the things. And then I wrote a one-woman inspiring comedy show. It was kind of a nice blend between all of my business knowledge and storytelling and, the stories throughout my life that taught me lessons in my life, and then infused that with comedy, just pure stand-up. And stand-up really became a way that I learned to cope with difficult and challenging things in my life. And the more I was able to turn painful experiences into funny stories, the less of a hold they had on me. And then I began teaching other people how they can do that for themselves, but not teaching them in a classroom context, teaching them by giving them a peek behind the curtain so that they can see in real time how I was able to turn tragedy into comedy, and how they can do the same thing in their business and their life.
Wow. It's interesting because I've had a couple of comedians between my two shows that I've taught. I always have fun really picking their brains, because I think it's kind of it's a vulnerable thing in a sense, but all of them have kind of said the same thing that you said about turning the pain into comedy and using it kind of as a way to work through that, and so it's an interesting thing to hear that. And it's kind of, a universal thing that I've heard among the few comedian friends and, people, like I said, that I've interviewed on these shows.
I wish I could tell you I was the first one to invent that, but
Yeah.
I think it was Mark Twain that said, tragedy plus time equals comedy. My thing is, Mr. Twain never said it had to take a long time. So how quickly can you get from something that was a challenging moment to something that you can laugh about? And I think, I've done so much work with companies over the decades, and, it's not uncommon to hear around the water cooler, someday we'll laugh about this, right? Like that's a potential company culture you could have. And, my theory is, why not shift that so that you can say, in 10 minutes we're going to laugh about this, right? Like how does that alter the culture of your business? From someday we'll laugh about this to in 10 minutes we'll laugh about this. How could that change your relationships, whether they're personal or business? If you just have a mindset of, all right, let's wallow in this for a little bit. Let's feel the challenge. Let's feel the pain. Let's just deal with that, for a moment. And then let's not let that have a stranglehold on us. Let's lean into humor and ask ourselves, like, what's funny about this? What's embarrassing about this? What's crazy about this? And I think the sooner you can get to that perspective, the more opportunity you have to really create the solutions that will get you out of those challenges, right? So when the challenge has a hold on you,
Mm-hmm.
you're restricted, and you really can't think creatively about all the solutions that are there for you to grab. But when you are light and playful, when you can laugh, it's hard to be stressed when you're laughing.
Right.
And so if you can laugh and bring some light humor to it, you can actually relax. There's lots of research that shows you can, the neural pathways in your brain are just, you have more synapses firing. And when you have more, uh, space, you can create new solutions. When you have more solutions, you have more confidence that you're going to come up with a solution that will solve the problem. And when you have more confidence that you can solve the problem, everyone else around you can relax, and then the work can get done.
Yeah. This is good, Merit. And to your point on that, it's interesting because I'm studying this whole thing right now on nervous system regulation. And a lot of the science behind that is, and when you mentioned kind of the science and the research, a lot of the science behind that is moving people from these parasympathetic states of, like dorsal vagal, whatever, where they're in shutdown, and how do we move them into a playful state or a calm state, right? And a lot of that centers around doing these activities. And some of that they talk about like dancing, or they talk about like you'll hear tapping or breathing. But I think yours is kind of that thing too. It's basically you're releasing the emotion, right? And they talk about a somatic release. I mean, we're talking now on a physiological level, taking what you're
Yeah,
talking about on a physiological level. And you know how sometimes you'll hear just getting up when you're in that moment and just letting out a scream or just shaking it off or doing something. And you're in a sense sort of using comedy in that same way on a larger scale, And so we do
exactly.
all these things in our lives, I think, on these big scales, like we talk about, affirmations and reading and all these things. But then there's other forms you hear about, like laughing yoga or stand-up comedy, I think
Yeah.
is another release. And so I think to your point, I'm listening to all that, and that's what's coming to mind when I hear you say this, because I'm fresh in this right now, studying this and working with my clients on these types of things. And sometimes, it's funny because I'll be like, hey, we'll say that, years from now, you're going to laugh about this particular situation. But I love your stance on, why does it have to take that long? Can we do it quicker? You know?
Exactly. And, let's put a little asterisk on that. There are some things in life that are big, and you are not going to laugh about them right away. And you may
Right.
never laugh about them, but you can create some space so that you can find some humor, maybe on the edges, like in observing how you are engaging in that drama. All right.
Right.
So, and again, there are certain things like that's not what I'm talking about here. But apart from the big
Yeah.
things that, God forbid, people don't have to, deal with, but
Right.
let's not be in an argument with reality that, I'm not talking
Yeah.
about the big stuff here.
Right, right. No, I absolutely get what you're saying. I know we always have to put those little disclaimers on there. I was on a
Yeah.
show the other day, and we were talking about coaching, and I was actually at one moment talking about, like when we're miserable, it's usually because we're doing something out of alignment with our values, what we see we should be doing, and we're probably not or we're not growing, and or we're not serving others. And I had to put out the disclaimer. Now, everybody, don't just go quit your job. Don't just decide tomorrow because you hate your job you're going to quit because you're in search of finding something else. No, look for something while you're at your job. It's like we have to put the
Yeah.
little disclaimers there. But I get what you mean. And it's really, I think, to lessen the emotional attachment to the thing that's causing the pain, whatever that
Right.
activity is, or the stress or the hardship, whatever that is how do we loosen some of the energy and emotion that's trapped on it And if we can work through
Exactly.
it quicker, right? Make
Yeah.
peace with it at some point. So
Yeah.
no, that's really good. So I want to talk a little bit about your CEO Select Sales, because this first, let me say this, because I'm a closer. And this is important stuff, because you know as well as I do, because you're dealing with this way more than I am, but I deal with entrepreneurs too. And this is a hard thing. Selling and closing is a hard thing. And I had
Yeah.
a really great mentor that I worked with for 2 years. And one of the things he taught us was really how to develop the process along the way, so that almost becomes superfluous. You don't really have to have this like selling moment, right? Because you've kind of set the stage up appropriately, right? But I
Yeah.
think the other big thing with that, and you'd probably agree with me on this, is selecting your right people to sell to. Because if you're trying to, be selling to somebody that's not your person, like if you're going in and you got steaks and you're going into McDonald's trying to sell a steak, those are different kinds of clientele.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I'm impressed with what you're doing, because I think selling and closing is a hard thing for a lot of people, and they get stuck in this.
I,
So I kind of want to open up there, because you've been doing this for a little while, and I'd love to know kind of what you see when you're working with clients.
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, the reason that we call the business Select Sales, and we spell it SELLECT, not because we don't know how to spell the word select, but because our philosophy is we want you to stop selling and start getting selected. So it's a little bit of a mindset shift, right? So
Mhm.
selling, closing feels very pushy, aggressive,
Right.
but the whole purpose of being selected is to make sure that you're asked, first of all, bringing down somebody's defense walls so that they'll tell you the real deal instead of that surface level question or problem or challenge that they're going to throw at you. They'll really they'll really share what is at the heart of it.
Yeah.
And when you can help someone, when you can create an environment where they can take their defense wall down and share with you honestly what's challenging them, then it's about you asking the right questions so that you can pull out of them the real issues and all the things that they've tried and what worked and what didn't work, and get them to uh, really make it more of a dialogue instead of you're trying to avoid buying something that
Right.
you don't need or want, or it's
Right.
too expensive, and I'm trying to ram this solution down your throat, whether or not it's good for you. So it really is, you are selecting the right, the most ideal client to work with for you, and they are selecting the right solution for them. And when it's that mutual selection process, then it's like, hey, why don't we just ask and answer each other's questions, and we'll see if we're a match. And we're not going to be a match for everyone. Earlier this morning, I was on a conference call with a prospective client. It was an association on the East Coast that has invited me to do programs for their association as a whole, one of their big conferences. So I did a workshop for them. I did the closing keynote for them. And then some of their members were asking them, hey, can you schedule Merit to come and speak to our organization? And so now we're looking at all these other programs. And so the woman who was in charge said, give me an idea of the programs that you do talk about. And I said, great. I'll give you a laundry list of here's topics that I'm well qualified to present on. Let me also give you a list of things that are not my best fit, right? Like, let's acknowledge up front, I am not the perfect presenter on a number of topics. And rather than be in an argument with reality, let me help you find people if you need these kinds of things. But I think that's a good example of, we're not going to be all things to all people. Let's
Right.
just figure out where we are aligned, what problems you have that I am a solution for, and go from there.
Yeah. No, I like all that you said. And going back even to the beginning when you were talking about asking the right questions, because I think that is so important. I read a book, and I know you probably read it, Spin Selling. I was working with a
Sure.
firm, and that book is so old. Like, I don't know how I never saw it. 22 years I was in Mary Kay and leadership selling. Clearly, when you're in Mary Kay, I mean, if you spend any time there, you have to learn how to sell. It's a different kind of sell. It's a small
Sure.
sale, but it is still a sell nonetheless. You got to good at selling product, and good at selling into recruiting, because you got to bring people in.
That's right.
But along the way, somewhere I got introduced to that book, and it was interesting because I didn't even realize that some of these things we were doing, I just didn't really even understand that there was a formula. We just sort of kind of got good at doing them. But I think even more so, a lot of my sales stuff I learned even when I started doing podcasting, when I really had to learn how to work on how I wanted to get people on the show and what I wanted to do and finding the right people and that kind of stuff. And so I think you've said some really good things when you talk about asking the right questions, because when you're asking questions that are very surface level, you're not really going to get the kind of answers you want. And you're probably not going to even end up with the right kind of people that you're wanting to sell to, because you're not digging enough to get the right information.
Exactly.
So I love it. And I also love that you pointed out recognizing that when it's not a fit, right? And I am like that too. To me, it is much easier for me, even with a client, to say, I don't know if I'm going to be a right fit for you. I'd like to chat with you and let's see where you're at, what you need, and see if I can even do that, because I might not be the right fit. I might know somebody that's better for you. And I'm okay with that. It's not even a rejection, So I
Exactly.
think when we change our mindset, you said at the very beginning with the selecting versus selling, right? I think
Yep.
when we change our mindset about what selling looks like, it comes from a different place. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The other thing that I think is important in that, when you think about selling and for some, I work a lot with professionals who would probably never call themselves salespeople, but
Sure.
they need to be influential, right? They're
Right.
in business development. They're not in sales, but
Right.
whatever,
Business
semantics.
development, yes.
But the other message that I bring to my audiences, particularly when I'm invited to do a keynote, whether it's the opening keynote at a big conference or somewhere in the middle to energize things, or at the end to just kind of reinforce everything that they've learned. But one of the main messages in that program is that open minds close deals, right?
Mm,
And the first
that's
step to a closed deal is an open mind. So there's two minds you have to open before any of the wonderful things you would learn in spin selling or challenger sales or Sandler or any of the other sales systems out there, or the Merit method or the select method, right? Like we call our process the open for business framework. And
right.
it's based on this principle that, you know, the first step to a closed deal is an open mind. So the first mind you have to open is your own, right? Have I already decided that it can't get any better, or am I open to a new possibility? And I want to
Mm,
ask that question to myself as a sales professional. But then I also want to ask that question or a version of that question to my prospective client to find out, have they already decided it can't get any better? Or are they open to a new possibility? Which is a fantastic question. And until you open their mind to a new possibility, it really doesn't matter how great you are, how amazing your stuff is,
right.
how many referrals you have or testimonials. Like none of that stuff is going to matter, because essentially people today we're so overwhelmed, overworked. We're just plain over it that our minds are really kind of, for the most part, we like to think that we're open-minded, but when you've got so much stuff on your plate and you just can't take in anything else, even if there's the perfect solution, you might not hear it unless I pave the way to remind you to hear this with an open mind, so that if you do hear something that's of value to you, you're ready to take action on it, as opposed to let me mull that over and think it over and all the things. So I think that's an important message. And I almost feel like I need to call all the people that I used to work with in my early days of, sales, training, coaching, consulting, just be like, hey, remember all that good stuff I told you?
Entrepreneurs, are you ready to level up your leadership skills? Tune in now for an exclusive offer designed just for you.
This is my time.
Did you know 63% of consumers prefer businesses aligned with their values? Recognizing your core values isn't just vital for business growth, it's the bedrock of effective leadership. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or an aspiring creator, identifying your core values is a key step in constructing the framework of a successful leader, enabling you to lead authentically, expand your business, and live life on your terms.
Never settled on play, putting the kettle to flame. I go 100 all day, foot on the pedal, no brakes. 10, 9, paid on my dues, waited in line. 8, 7,
Are you ready to access tools to kickstart your leadership journey? Unlock a treasure trove of insights and get your free resources at www.linktree/Jennifer Loehding. Take that crucial first step toward realizing your leadership aspirations and elevate your leadership game today.
Yeah, I forgot this one part. Like, I didn't know this until later. But you know, it I think that's, if I could go back in time, that's the message I would want to share with everybody about, developing business is, really the first step to a closed deal is an open mind.
It's so good. And I had a guy on my other show, James Bond. He wrote a book called Brain Glue.
You
And
had James Bond on?
Yeah, isn't that fun? I know he is just like, oh, like, that's why he opened up when he came on. But I know the name, you're like, James Bond. But he wrote this book called Brain Glue, and he talks about like catchy and sticky titles, right? But the reason I'm telling you this is because every time I do a show, I remember little bits and pieces about all the people that I've talked to, and you'll hear me so there will be some point you're going to come up in another show. I'm going to be like, this Merit Kahn girl came on and she was amazing. I always have stories and I love it because I have so many things to talk about with people. But funny thing he told me, he said, something he said to break kind of the ice. He said, your mind is like a parachute. It works better when it's open. So when you kept talking about this, about having the open mind, that was going through my head, James Bond, because I've used that line on many people, Bear. Like when they're being narrow-minded, I said, your mind is like a parachute. It works better when it's open.
That is absolutely true.
Proof as a salesperson why it needs to be like a parachute, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Great.
There's probably a good analogy in there. My boyfriend is a retired Navy SEAL, and he always tells me about the parachuting into wherever situations, right? And they literally parachute like under the horizon. It's like timed and orchestrated. It's fascinating to me, but yeah, he would agree. Like open parachutes are the best, but also, there's, I'll have to ask him about this because it's kind of stealth, like it's open, but you're like gliding in. So I wonder if there's a sales analogy in there.
Another analogy in there. We just came full circle with all of this. We went from to this Brain Glue open mind. Now we're Navy SEAL, and the whole there's a whole full circle going here with this.
Absolutely.
I think it's so funny when you hear these kinds of things. But no, and I agree with you. And it sounds, like I really think it's not even so much like what you're saying about selling. It's influencing, right? It's really getting them to be open to. And how do you, to me, it gets back to, again, how do you know that if you haven't asked questions, if you haven't asked the right questions. And I think it's such an interesting thing because I was telling somebody, having come from the network marketing space, we start off, how we were trained was with scripts. Now I just cringe when I hear the idea of scripts because I think they're good for maybe an initiation, but beyond that, you got to get out of that because it really gets back to being relational. And how do you be relational? You got to have dialogue. You got to ask questions. I mean, the scripts might get you to the door. They're not going to keep the person around and they're not necessarily going to close the sale, And so,
well, I think, and it's funny how, I love this conversation because I'm realizing, well, I've noticed that studying comedy and performing stand-up had taught me a lot about the sales process. Like I had my sales expertise, my process, and I've been teaching that for, at least 15 years before I started studying stand-up. But, in stand-up and with my theater show, my one-woman show, that's 100% scripted. There isn't a single thing that happens in my theater show that's like, oh, I wonder if she just made that up on the spot. No, it's a very tightly scripted performance. My stand-up is tightly scripted. However, I know that material so well that it allows me to let it play in the background, right? I know exactly where I'm going and exactly the joke that's coming next. I pretty much know the audience reaction for the most part. But because I know that so well, I can dance with it.
Yeah.
Right. And because in stand-up, while, comedians don't often like the hecklers, there is crowd work, right? You see certain comedians are known, Matt Rife, known for his crowd work. And so that takes a level of of knowing your material, knowing your script, like your sales script as an example, so well that you can get back to it at any point, but you can also improvise and really be with your audience, whether that's a one-on-one conversation in a business context, or an audience of hundreds of people. You need to be able to know your material so that you can not be so scripted with it. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And thank you for bringing that forward. And I agree with you 100%, because I think so often we rely on, and I'm not opposed to them. I want to be clear about that, because I used them the entire time I was at Mary Kay, but I also knew them. I practiced them well. And so that when I did have to use them, I got to a place where I didn't, because I knew them, I didn't think anything about it. But I always, when I would change, when I was doing a new promotion, or I was trying to do something a little bit different, I would write something out and I would practice it. And then that way I felt confident enough in the skill that I had it, that, like what you were talking, I could dance with it, but come back to it. Right. And I think that's what I'm trying to allude to. Maybe didn't word that very well, but I don't think we don't need them. I do think there is a time and place for them. I think it's like I always say with medicine, right? Like there's a time and place for medicine, and there's a time and place when we probably stop eating bad, you know what I mean? So exactly. I do think there is, but I appreciate you bringing that to light, because I love that you drew the parallel between the comedy and that. And I didn't even know that about stand-up comedians. See, that's something new that I learned too. I didn't even know. I thought you guys sort of might kind of improvise that.
Well, what my favorite thing is watching, like I have a bit where I do some crowd work, but I know the lines. I know the jokes that I am leading you to. Right. Sometimes somebody will say something, it'll surprise me, and something new, improvised, will just happen. But for the most part, when a comedian asks an audience member a question, they know exactly where they're going with it later.
That's good. You've done it.
So that's sort of like the magic trick I'm not supposed to teach you how to do it.
I feel like it's sort of like, when I always tell this, I taught aerobics many, many years ago. When
Me
I was
too.
In my late 20s. Oh, well, see, we got some parallels. Yeah. Back in the 90s, late 90s, when Bowie's was around, I started train. But it's funny because I remember the very beginning in my garage, like practicing those 8-count moves, like those 8-count patterns.
The grapevines,
because I was doing step classes. And so I had my whole routine memorized, so that and I remember at the beginning, couldn't deviate because I didn't know it well enough that if we messed up, I was going to have a problem. And then eventually I got to a place where I could walk into a class and I wouldn't even have a routine planned. I'd just get in and like, today we're going to do this. However the spirit moves me, this is what we're doing today, So I think getting back to what I'm hearing underneath is just practicing your stuff enough, maybe like anything that you do, if it was karate, taekwondo, sales, comedy, whatever, is knowing your craft well enough that you have it underneath, but can move about the cabin freely and sit back down if you have to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not barred by that piece of paper where you got to go, let me read, every minute of it every single time,
Exactly.
Use it at the beginning, but get good. Practice makes perfect, right?
Exactly.
I love it, Merit. I love it. You're awesome. I would like to know, you said some really good things about keeping an open mind. We talked about that. We talked about a lot of good stuff, but I'd love to know, what do you feel like are some strong, what are some attributes of strong closers? Like, what do these people look like, so that, like our audience, and they're going right now, they're listening to this and going, maybe I'm struggling with this close. And we talked about keeping an open mind, but what else do you feel like sets these people apart?
Well, I think the research shows that there's certain emotional intelligence attributes that are characteristic of top performing sales professionals. So when I think about the close specifically, if I had $1 for every time somebody asked me, like, what's that closing move? And what do you say to close the sale? Like, you're not going to like the answer, because the close happens in the beginning. It doesn't happen at the end. The close is how, is directly related to your ability to build rapport and ask the right questions and set the expectations for what happens at the end of this conversation. And so, but I think that, if I were to just kind of say, based on the research, what a strong salesperson who would be very good at closing would look like and that would be somebody who has strong self-regard. So self-regard is a little bit different than self-esteem. Self-esteem is an outside-in thing. You tell me I'm good, I feel better. That's self-esteem. Self-regard emanates from the inside out. So I feel good, I feel confident, and you pick up on that. That's self-regard. So I think that's a very important thing, because I can't ask you tough questions if I don't have self-regard. Another important characteristic is they have strong interpersonal relationships. So not necessarily life of the party, extrovert, doesn't have to be that. I know some very introverted professionals who are extremely efficient in a sales role, but interpersonal relationships is that ability to connect, to really want to have a meaningful relationship with somebody, to really seek that best solution for them as well as for you. So it's like a partnership dance. So they're strong in that. They're also strong in optimism. Pretty tough to be a good closer if you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, if you don't see more opportunity. Like you've got to see something working out, because sometimes a one call close is nice, but sometimes these are, met over a period of time and lots of conversations and longer, more complex, consultative, customized programs and solutions that require more conversation. So you got to be able to hang in there. So that's optimism. I'd say, those are three very important aspects. There's 15 emotional intelligence attributes that I assess for, but those are three really important ones for selling effectiveness.
Yeah, no, those were all good. And I would agree with you. I think the first one I think is huge. I'm reading, I've said this on several shows right now, because I'm reading this book, Worthy, by Jamie Kern-Lemus. She was the founder of It Cosmetics and ended up selling it to L'Oreal, but incredible story. Her book is awesome. But her very first chapter in that book, that first chapter hooked me. She did very good in putting that right there. But she talks about the difference between self-worth and self-confidence. And a lot of times I think, even myself as a coach, I mean, I've been in, I was in Mary Kay 22 years. So I've been around positive culture the entire time, mentorship. And I never really thought about the difference between self-confidence and self-worth. And in your case, you're talking about the self-regard, right? High self-regard. I think that's the self-worth. And what she talks about in that book is you can do all these things like build skills, and that will build your self-confidence, but it doesn't always build your self-worth. And that's why sometimes you could be talented, well suited to do something, yet you're not actually excelling because you don't believe in here that you are worthy of it. And so when you said that right there, I'm like, yes, because to me, those people that can show up and they love what they do, they're passionate about it, they feel confident in their ability to talk about it, they don't feel threatened by it, they don't feel threatened by a rejection. Doesn't mean they like every aspect, but you know who those people are. You just pick up that energy, And so when you say that, all of them are important, but that's probably my favorite one, because I think when you come from that place, you could probably sell anything, really. I mean,
you probably could, as long as you were, as long as you learned the right. Yeah, if you know what the real issues are and you can form questions to uncover, the issues, then it's not that complicated.
I agree.
But I have a funny sidebar for you. I actually once dated a guy whose last name was Worthy. So I could have been Merit Worthy.
Oh my goodness, that would have been great, Merit.
Right? I know.
I love your name, by the way. And I think I told you I saw one of your comedy clips where you were making a joke about your name. I thought it was cute. It's great. I love it. I love that you've been able to tie these two together and be able to find something fun in this, but also take the fun and bring it into the work side and be able to put it into a passion and make an income out of it. Because I think, in my other show, Behind the Dreamers, we talk about the story in that one. It's not quite as content driven here. Here I like to get into topics, but there it's about the story. And I talk about living the extraordinary. And it's really about being able to take what we love and monetize that and serve other people with it, right? That's really what living the extraordinary to me is. It's living life on our terms and doing what we love, you know?
Well, we're going to have a conversation over there because we'll talk all about how I've taken my passion, all my lifetime passion for performing, being on stages, from the keynote stage to creating my theater show. And now I wrote a show, I produced it, I perform it, I've performed it across the country, sold out crowds. And I'm, literally now I'm working on, how do I really tour that beyond what I can put together for by myself. So I'm, if there's any tour managers or producers out there,
I love it.
I got a package ready to go.
I want to ask you kind of a fun question and then we'll wrap this. I would love to know maybe the coolest venue that you've, or I guess maybe your most fun thing that you've gotten to do with this whole stand-up comedy thing, or try even maybe speaking. Maybe it's in the speaking part of it.
Okay, well, let's see. I have a few fun ones. So many years ago, I had an opportunity. It was it came together at the last minute, and their program schedule was was incredibly tight. And this woman had seen me speak, and she's like, "I really want to get you on her program, but I really don't know how to fit you in." And I'm looking at the agenda, and I go, "Well, looks like you have an hour-long bus ride over here." And she's like, "What?" And I go, "I don't know, give me one of those microphones like a tour operator on a bus and let's do a program." And I literally did a program on a moving bus.
I love it.
So
oh my
that was creative.
Wow. Fun.
Let's see what I can't, that's the one that comes to my mind at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sure you've had quite a few fun experiences. I know when you get put on, I didn't warn you about that one. Sometimes I just think of stuff. I'm like, wait, I ask that question because some of you, we get to, the fun thing about, like I said, what I get to do is I get to talk to all of you amazing people that are doing cool things out there. And it's fun because, I feel like, when you even said about the scripting on the comedy, you don't really know all these kinds of things, right? And people just assume things. And so you learn a lot by listening to people talk,
I'll tell you one other creative place. I don't know how this didn't pop in my head first, but when I was rehearsing my one-woman show, I'm in Denver. I was working with a director out of New York. And so we were rehearsing by Zoom. And one day we had this incredible, I had my set, kind of set up in the basement. And we had this really great run through. It was such a good performance. And she goes, "Gosh, it's too bad no one else saw that. That was such a good run through." And I thought, I kind of looked around. I'm like, yeah, that is too bad. I wonder, I guess I could put a few chairs down here and do a show in my basement. Well, that idea turned into, I have a 52-seat theater in my basement with a stage, professional lights, sound system. And I do a suggested donation because, you're not really supposed to do this out of your house. But yeah, I have my professional comedian friends come over and I make sure that they're well paid. And we do a couple shows a month out of my basement. And it's absolutely a blast. And it's like this little speakeasy in this suburban neighborhood with an HOA. And, unless you know me or someone who knows me, you're not getting an invitation. I don't advertise it to the public, but it's a really special experience, and it's a fun little spot.
Well, good for you. It's exciting. It's good that you found whatever your calling is and you get to do it. I think it's awesome. So
thanks.
And I can tell you're passionate about it, which I think that excites me. I love it when people are passionate about what they're doing. So, Merit, if our audience wants to get in touch with you, maybe somebody listening to this wants to pick up the book, they want to follow you, maybe they want to reach out to you to learn, more about selling and pick up the rest of these tips that we didn't talk about today.
Yeah.
Or where do we want to send them?
I would send them to my website. So it's Merit Kahn, MERITKAHN, Merit like a certificate of. And that kind of gets you into the three main spots. So on that homepage, you can choose conferences, theater shows, or comedy clubs. Pick your poison, and that'll take you to a little micro site that will give you all the information. But there's always a Let's Talk button on the top right. And, don't hesitate. Just book some time on my calendar. If you got an idea, if you've got a company that needs some training, an event you're planning that needs a speaker, if you want to do a fundraiser, I've been doing my theater show as a fundraiser for opportunities. So that's my I love doing those. If you got a comedy spot and you need a fun comedian, I'm good with that too.
I have a feeling you're fun at everything. So I
Ah,
think wherever
yeah.
you show up, it's going to be good. They're not going to be bored. I love it.
No.
I love it, Mary. Well, thank you so much for being on here. I appreciate you, your time, and all your wisdom. I wish you the best of success and keep doing your thing and shining and all those good things.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it.
Been fun. And to our listeners, we appreciate you and love you. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And of course, if you enjoy our show, head on over to Apple, give us a review over there. You can hit the subscribe button on YouTube so we can keep sharing all this fabulous content. And as I always say, be kind to yourself and be kind to one another. We will see you next time.